So we are starting chapter 52. We finished chapter 51, and then we have 52, and then we have 53, and then we finish this entire Tanya, this entire book of the 5 books of Tanya, Likutei Amarim. This is the longest, the most developed, the most significant, the most foundational, and we're almost done it. So in chapter 52, we are continuing what we started in chapter 51. We have a question. How can we say God is found in a certain place? Like he is found in the Holy of Holies in the temple. I mean, he's everywhere. Everything is him. This is God. All is God. There is nothing but God. So how can we give God a specific locale? That was the question. And to answer that question, we spoke at length about self, and we explained, and we all know this so well, that as our soul relates to our body, there are 3 stages. Stage 1, the essence of soul is in the entire body, equally essence and completely beyond the body's perception. So it's intense, it's soul, it's equal, and the body can't read it at all. Then there's a tremendous constriction for level 2, when the soul is found in a very constricted form in the most transparent to soul part of body, which is our brain. And here's where we have the beginning of revelation of soul, that the body can read it, that the body can benefit from it. It's only in the brain, but it's now small enough to be readable, discernible, receivable. And then level 3, much more constriction, and goes to every part of the body in a very differentiated way for each part to receive exactly, precisely what it needs to exist and function. And all of this, which is true about me, is to help me understand God, because there's a verse, Mibsari echazeh Eloka. From my flesh, I will perceive God. What do you mean, from my flesh, I'll perceive God? We don't believe we're God, but we're made in his image. We're a mirror of him. We work this way because he does. It doesn't start with us, it starts with him. He works this way. That's why we work this way, but we have to work backwards. I don't know how he works, but I know how I work. So if I'm made in his image, if I get how I work, I can say, oh, that's how he works, because we're made in his image. So the second half of chapter 51, we started unpacking this in the reality by God. And we did level 1. God in his essence and being, just like the soul in my body, is intense, beyond perception of the world, and equal in all the worlds. Completely equal, completely intense, completely beyond any receptivity by creation. And then we jumped to level 3. When God is constricted enough that in every aspect of creation, he's different and differentiated, and exactly as per the capacity of that level to receive and be vivified and do its function. But we didn't speak about level 2. We spoke about level 1. God is equal, the same, and beyond. Check. We spoke about level 3. God is constricted enough, differentiated, readable. Check. But where's the very significant level 2? Which in our body was when the soul constricts itself to be expressed in our brain. And from there, descends further to be expressed in every part of the body. So where is that level 2? We don't know. We didn't say a word about it. That's what we're going to talk about in chapter 52. So that's exactly what we're going to begin now, chapter 52. Let's understand that middle space between when God is completely intense, completely beyond perception, completely equal in all of creation. Jump, we don't know what's in the middle. And then when God is small enough that he's so differentiated on each level, exactly what it needs for its functionality. Where's level 2? That's chapter 52. Now we're going to go back to the metaphor of man and his soul. From my flesh, I understand what's going on really by God, which is why my flesh behaves the way it does. And just like in the soul of man, the primary revelation of the vitality of the soul is in the brain. And all the other body parts, all the limbs, all the veins, all the sinews, every other part of the body receives the light, receives the strength, just what it needs for its functionality. Only that bit that's shining to it from the brain for its own function, for its own being a part of the body. So the revelation is in the brain, and then from there it trickles, so to speak, way minimized for each limb exactly what that limb needs, like tiny strands of energy, if you can envision, coming from the brain to each body part, but tiny little strands of energy. The main source is in the brain. Well, guess what? This is just like what's going on upstairs. So too, literally, so to speak. Ikar gilar klolas hamshachas hachayis lahachayos ha'olam ha'bruim shebehem humuluvash v'nichlal beretzono v'chachmaso uvinaso v'daso yisparech. It works this way by us because it works this way by God. So the primary revelation of the expression of the vitality to vitalize creation for creation to be. Creation in the broad strokes, creation in the tiniest details. Every creation on every reality in all of them is that energy that's coming from how God is expressed in his will and wisdom and understanding and connectivity. Chachma, Bina, and Das. Hanikra b'shem Moichan, that we call the intellect of God. So this was a critical piece of information. So let's pause a minute to make sure we got this very critical piece of information that is the key to a lot of things. God's essence throughout all creation, unperceivable by all creation. Well, God has to be perceived, otherwise nothing's going to happen. So there's a tremendous shrinkage. You're trying to get into something that's too small for you. You're squeezing in, God's squeezing and contracting to the most fitting receptacle for God's energy, what we will call the intellect of God. Oh, that's why our soul is revealed in our intellect. Exactly, because we mirror him, and that's where his energy is revealed. Now we're talking the intellect of God. We're expressing clearly there are 4 levels here of God's manifestation that in totality are his intellect, his will. Chachma, Bina, and Das. Chachma is the original flash of what we call the seminal wisdom, the flash of understanding, the flash of insight. The Bina, the comprehension, when you can dissect and break apart and put together and analyze and synthesize all of the processes of intellect. And the Das, the connectivity, when what you learn is you, when you're completely integrated the learning into your own reality. It's not just something abstract in your mind, it truly has become you. So those 4 capacities, God's will, God's seminal wisdom, that flash, God's understanding, that comprehension of that flash, dissertation of the flash, digestion of the flash, and the Das, the connectivity that you've integrated that awareness, that understanding into self. These are the 4 elements of the intellect of God. And that's where he is first revealed to all of creation. That's level 1? No, it's not level 1. Level 1, like by us, because we work like he does. It's not like by us, it's by him. It's by him, that's why it's like by us. He is completely throughout every level of creation. Every level of creation can't perceive a thing. And then he squashes into the intellect of creation. And from here begins the process of revelation that creation can feel, can apprehend, can benefit from God's energy. And then from there, just like from your brain, there's those like threads that come out to vitalize every part of your body. From that space, there comes very, very diminished God's energy to each and every level of creation. But it's a little more complicated by God than it is by us. This was the first very critical point. So now we're going to develop this further. And the Rebbe is going to say something here that I think is so cool, so amazing, so practical. Ve'hein hein hameluvashim b'Torah u'mitzvosecha. And this intellect is revealed in Torah and her commandments, which is an unbelievable thing the Rebbe is telling us. Unbelievable. What is the Rebbe telling us here? The Rebbe is saying the first revelation of God to creation is in God's intellect. Well, that makes a lot of sense to us because we already learned at length and reviewed many times that the first revelation of soul in our body is in our intellect, and we mirror him. So yeah, that works. We got that. What it says. And what's the revelation of that intellect? What's the repository of that intellect? Where does that intellect express itself? In Torah and her commandments. Torah is the wisdom of God, and the commandments are his will. Remember, we said there were 4 components to God's intellect. Will, then we had Chachma, Bina, and Das. Chachma is that seminal wisdom, that flash. Bina is a development of that flash. And Das is the integration, the connectivity to that flash. Chachma, Bina, and Das. Torah is Chachma, Bina, and Das. Torah is God's thoughts. Torah is God's diary. It's what he's thinking. It's what he's understanding. And the commandments are the will, what he wants. That's why, in a sense, commandments are higher than Torah. And of course, in another sense, Torah is higher than commandment. But Torah is an expression of the will. This is what I want. I like this. I don't like that. I want this. I don't want that. God's will and the backstory, the thinking process, God's wisdom, that's Torah. What the Rebbe is saying here is to give you a heightened appreciation for something you probably already appreciate because that's why you're on this class. In all of creation, not able to read God at all. Nothing. Zero. So God has to constrict himself to be readable, to be perceivable, to give. God wants to give. He has to make himself small enough so he can give. And making himself small enough, he's looking for what's the most God-like aspect of creation that, okay, he's still going to be small, but at least he can breathe a little. There'll be a little comfort zone in the smallness. Well, that's intellect, like it is by us, because that's how it's so by him. So in his will and wisdom, that's where, okay, there's some space here for God. So this is the first expression of God to creation that creation can handle, that creation can hear, that creation can grasp. So here we have God's energy expressing itself through his will and wisdom as they're expressed in Torah and her commandments. So that means that there's the maximum God, if you want to use that term, the maximum expression of God to creation is Torah mitzvahs. Everything else is a far, far, far secondary. And then add a few more fars. Not everything else meaning, yeah, our cell phone, yeah, piece of plastic, technology, yeah, this is a far second to Torah mitzvahs. No. Everything else. Planet Atzilus, higher than planet Atzilus. The angels, higher than the angels. Everything else, all of creation. We're not just saying in our physical reality, God constricted himself into the intellect which is expressed in Torah and mitzvahs. No, that's not what we're saying here. We're saying in all of creation. Not just the Milky Way galaxy of physicality, the physical manifestation of the spiritual world of Asiya, the world of descent. No, in all of creation, from the first constriction to create, all the way until our physical reality and this. That's all of creation. And in all of creation, God's first expression is in his will and wisdom as they are expressed in Torah and her commandments. So when we learn Torah, can you imagine what we're plugging into? Like, we really can't, to be honest. We can't. But a little bit of sensitivity, of respect, of awe, of wow. We open up anything in Torah you're going to learn. That is part of the primordial expression of God to all of creation. This is higher. In this is embedded more energy than anything else, than the highest celestial worlds and highest celestial beings and the highest angels and anything you want to talk about, anything Kabbalistic that sounds so spiritual and wow and mystical and cool. All that's very, very secondary to God in Torah and her commandments. So when I learn Torah, I am one with that primordial revelation of God to all of creation. When I serve any commandment, every commandment, again, this is an expression, the will of it, you can say not per se the action of it, but the will of it, that's God's first expression to all of creation. So it's like, wow, we have this ability. We can connect to God in his most primordial state. Yes, we can. Now, since we don't feel a thing, which is why we can exist and do it, because if we felt, trust me, we would have been gone a long time ago. But since we don't feel a thing, we can do it. But since we don't feel a thing, we can forget what we're doing. We cannot realize and appreciate and get the power of what we're connecting to, because it's another Chumash. Chitas is very, very long this week. It's another long Rashi. You don't want to just daven it. You want to learn it. You want to pay attention. You want to try to understand. But it's long. You got a lot to do. No, this is God's primordial revelation of self to creation. This is amazing. And he's sharing. He's making me privy to him. That's what's happening. That's the amazing thing the Rebbe is saying here. God's first expression to creation is in his will and wisdom as they are expressed in Torah and her commandments. It is so hard, as we're going to say, that actually creation doesn't get directly from this. Torah needs a filter. This is too intense for creation. But we can access this every single time we learn. Every single time we learn. So sometimes you learn and you're inspired, and sometimes you learn and you weren't so inspired. But that doesn't really make a difference. Every time you learn, you are one with the original source of vitality to all of creation. And the fact that it's 5,785 years later doesn't make it old or dated. This used to be important. No, this is this happening this second reality, that the creation's first expression is flowing through Torah and her commandments. But I said, this is too intense for the world to get directly. We need a filter. So the Rebbe will explain. Now, this does not work this way by us. So here we're deviating from the vision of soul and body, because the soul and body, in the end of the day, is a soul. It's not God. So my body can handle the soul, but this is still too intense for creation. And the revelation of the entirety of this expression, of this descent, hu mekor hachayis, is the source of life. Torah is the source of life. Asher ha'olamos bekablim, that every world is going to receive. Mimekol echad befratos, each dimension of the world in its detail, in its specificity, what it needs for its function. A little ray from the intensity of God as he is in the intellect, as he is in Torah. A little ray is going to come out. Remember, just like we said, the soul in the brain, little lights coming out to vivify each body part, what each one needs, very small, from the intensity of the soul in the brain, from the intensity of God's first expression as it's found in his will and wisdom, in Torah and her commandments. A little light's going to come out. Very minimized to each level of creation for it to be. Only a little ray is extending from this source. Kedimyon, or like a parable for this, a metaphor for this, like light hamispashet me'ashemesh al derech mashal. If we could think of light and the sun. Now, Hasidus very often uses this metaphor because it really works. It's very easy for us to understand. In the next book of Tanya, Shara Yicha V'Emuna, we really analyze this metaphor and really extract a lot of depth out from it. But here we're just saying it very basically. There's a planet. It's called Sun. It's 92 million miles away. And over 92 million miles, that's a long journey. That's a long schlep. But from that planet Sun, because the sun has such burning, intense light, it could still have rays extending to give us warmth and energy and heat and light 92 million miles away. But because it traversed 92 million miles, it's really very, very weak, which is good because this is about exactly what we need. And if we were any closer to the sun, we would burn up completely. And that's why all the planets that, so to speak, are closer to the sun are way too hot for life. And all the planets that are further from the sun are way too cold for life. And God perfectly positioned Earth and the sun that it's very weak, 92 million miles weak, and therefore just right. Perfect for our existence, very, very, very weak. The Rebbe is giving this vision, the sun and the ray that's traversed 92 million miles. For us to understand God as he constricted himself into his intellect, into his will and wisdom, which are encased in Torah and her commandments, and compared to that, the light that comes forth to vivify, I don't just mean to vivify physicality, I mean to vivify Olam Hatzilus, to vivify beyond Atzilus, to vivify the highest, as we call them, Ne'etzalim, the highest celestial beings. That's like the rays on planet Earth, 92 million miles from their source, the sun. That's how much weaker they are. That's how much weaker it is to get to this highest celestial being. If you remember, as we learned, I think it might have been 2 classes ago, where the Rebbe said that once we're already talking on level 3, where God's light is minimized to work for each level of creation as it is, not such a big difference. Levels of revelation, levels of concealment between all the creation. And we're like, wow, there's not such a big difference? There's not such a big difference between the godliness that's revealed in Olam Hatzilus and the godliness revealed on planet Earth? There's not such a big difference between the godliness revealed in Olam Hatzilus and the godliness revealed in Symptom Harishon? I mean, it seems to me that's a very big difference. But all of this is very relative differences. This is already after the 92 million mile journey. The sun's rays are stronger in Ecuador than they are in Canada. That's true. And for us on planet Earth, it seems like a very big difference between the sun in Ecuador and the sun in Canada. But if you're envisioning the rays in contrast to planet sun, Ecuador and Canada are like almost irrelevant. So if you're talking about God as he is in his first revelation with the will and wisdom of self, as it's encased in Torah and her commandments, and then you compare that to any level of level 3 as that energy then vivifies creation, it's 92 million miles away. It's all so far. Already, after I traveled the 92 million miles, after we're already on level 3 and we're constricted enough to vivify level of creation, there's a difference between Canada and Ecuador. There's a difference between Tzimtzum Harishon and Tohu and Tikkun and Atzilus and Gashmius. There's differences. But those are so small compared to the basic, incredible gap, the vastness of God in his intellect, in his will and wisdom as is expressed in Torah, and as he is on any level of creation. So this again is really tremendously emphasizing. It's so impactful, this thought, I want God? Go to Torah. If you're in Torah, you are getting more God than any celestial being. He's much more there than anywhere else. This is his first revelation, is Torah. It's like Isaiah, Yeshaya said, you're thirsty, go drink water. What's he telling me? Don't drink soda, don't drink orange juice, drink water. He's saying, you're thirsty. You want spirituality and meaning and purpose? Go to the water. Go to the source of living waters. Go to God. That and only that will quench your thirst. If you want God, go to Torah. In Torah, you have him more than anything in creation has God. And as I'm saying, all of creation does not get God direct from Torah. That's too intense. Any questions, any thoughts on any of this?
Rebbe said, when you say Torah, you mean Tanya, Stichot of the Rebbe, anything that's connected.
Torah. Anything. It does not have to be Chassidus. No, anything of Torah. all Torah. You could be learning halacha, you could be learning a pasuk chumash, you could be learning a midrash, you could be learning a piece of Gemara. All Torah is containing God's first expression of self. For various reasons, there's specific advantages in the study of halacha and Jewish law. There's obviously very strong advantages in the studying of Hasidic dimension. But from this perspective, we're saying Torah. Ukochos ivrei haguf mehamoach hanal. What we're saying here, just like in our body, we said that the first expression of the soul was in the mind. And then from the mind, there was a tremendous minimization for the power of soul to go to all the limbs of the body. So too here. God's first expression is in his intellect, will, and wisdom, Chachma Bina Das, seminal wisdom, understanding, connectivity. And then, as vast as the sun to the rays, as vast as in our understanding of self from our brain to our body parts, is that life so minimized, like by me, to get from my brain to every specific faculty of my body. By God, from his intellect, his will, and Chachma, Bina, and Das, seminal wisdom, understanding, and connectivity, to every part of creation. Umakor zeh hu hanikra alma de eskalia, umetrenusa, ve'ema tata v'shchina. Now, this revelation of God in his intellect cannot directly interface with creation. It's too much. It's too intense. We are privy to it. We can open up a Chumash. We can open up a Tanya. We could open up a Sicha. We could open up a English, Hebrew. It doesn't make a difference. We have so much Torah at our disposal. You don't have a book? Open up your computer. Open up your phone. Get Otzar Chachma. You can have all of Torah on your computer screen. But creation can't handle this level. Too intense. So the energy of God, as it's revealed in the will and wisdom, expressed in Torah and her commandments, now goes through a filter, is now deposited, so to speak, in another faculty of God. Will, Chachma, Bina, and Das, these are the highest faculties. Will is in Keser, the crown over the 10 dimensions. And then there's 10 dimensions. This is true on every level of creation, at least we'll say simply within the worlds of Tikkun, the 4 worlds we discuss, Atzilus, Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya. We have 10 spheros, 10 manifestations of God's energy. And it's like almost as, so to speak, what the human form is modeled after, the 3 intellect and the 7 emotional, becoming the body of man. And over those 10, we have the crown. In the Hebrew, the Keser. So by God, on every level of these worlds, we have his Keser, his crown, and we have these 10 dimensions. The crown possesses 2 qualities. Its inner quality is God's pleasure. Its external and lower quality is God's will. The place where God's energy first shines is in his will, this lower dimension of the crown of Keser, and in the first 3 of the 10 faculties, what we call the 10 spheros or sphirot, Chachma, Bina, Das, the seminal wisdom, the understanding, the connectivity. In those 4 energies is God revealed. They're on the top. Well, that makes most sense. Of course, it's the first expression of the highest revelation, but from there it doesn't directly go to creation. It now has to go through another processing. From the highest of the 10, the crown above the 10, and the first 3 of the 10, we're now going to go all the way down to number 10. The crown, and then Chachma, Bina, Das, the 3 intellectual faculties. Then we have 6 emotional faculties. And then we have the final sphera, the final dimension, the final faculty that we call Malchus, Malchut, which means sovereignty. So you see the connection that on the top of all we have the crown and on the bottom we have the sovereignty. And you're like, well, that's weird. Sovereignty is on the bottom. This is strange. It's on the bottom because it's the receptacle. It's receiving from everything that came above it. But it can like take it all in, process, digest, create, and new life comes forth, which is the next lower new dimension. That's why Malchus, sovereignty, is the female dimension. Just as the woman is receiving and creating, it's a dimension of speech, which is an expression outward. So sovereignty receives this high energy, and then from her it can flow and there can be creation. So what I just read you are 4 different titles for this 10th dimension, the dimension of Malchus, of sovereignty. So if we look at these names, most of which are Kabbalistic, and the last one is actually from the Talmud, and they really express different dimensions of what sovereignty, what Malchus is, which we really want to understand, because the dynamics between God in his will and wisdom and God in his sovereignty, the dynamics between these two, that's how creation emerges. That's how creation is vivified. This is that missing link. You understand why they're put in a separate chapter. This is another whole complexity we need to understand. It was very simple. Level 1, God completely intense and completely unperceivable and completely the same. Okay, I said that in one sentence. I've said that sentence many times. We get it completely. And then God gets so small that he could go into every level and he's different and he's perceivable. We got that also. I've also said that many times. That's easy. But in between, what happens is sort of something we have to wrap our mind around. Because there's some dynamics here between God in his highest expression, his will and wisdom as it is within Torah, and his seemingly lowest expression of Malchus, and the dynamics between these two allows level 3 to happen and creation to be fed, to emerge, to be vivified. So we have here 4 terms for Malchus. Let me look at them again, now that we know we're talking about that. Umakor zehu hanikra alma de iskalia. That's a Kabbalistic term. It means the world of revelation. Next term, umetrenusa. That means, also a Kabbalistic term, the queen. Ve'ematata. That's also a Kabbalistic term. It means the lower mother. Vishchina. And Shechina is the term in the Talmud. All 4 of these terms are talking about the same thing. The Talmud knows Kabbalah? Yes, it's one Torah. There's the revealed Torah, there's the esoteric Torah, it's one Torah. We can use different labels and different terminologies. It's one Torah. So let's look briefly at these names, and then the Rebbe is going to unpack these names a little bit for us to understand what is this Malchus that somehow between will and wisdom and Malchus, the energy comes to vivify all of creation. So the first term was Alma de Iskalia. Malchus is called the world of revelation. Now everything here is in contrast too. So Malchus, sovereignty, is a world of revelation. Everything higher is called Alma de Iskasia, the world of concealment. Meaning, we're going to look at the model of the highest of the 4 spiritual worlds that we are closely connected to, right? Because our physical world is after 4 spiritual worlds. So that's the galaxy we know and speak about, so we're going to focus on that one. So the highest spiritual world is Atzilus. Atzilus has, as we said, the crown, pleasure and will, and the 10 faculties, the 3 intellectual, the 6 emotional, and Malchus. God's first expression is in the lower dimension of the crown, will, and the 3 intellectual. God in his intensity, now creation can just begin to apprehend it, but it's still very intense. And that's engarbed in Torah, and it's still very intense. And this energy now comes into Alma de Iskalia, revelation. Everything higher than Malchus is Alma de Iskalia. It's too intense, it's too spiritual, it's too holy, not perceivable. Alma Disgalia means it's small enough that it can be revealed. So Malchus is the 10th. She's the bottom. Well, she's so low. Why is she important here? She's very important because she's low. She's low. She's constricted enough that there can be revelation, that we can perceive, that we can get it. Because everything higher, wow, imagine like the most brilliant professor in the world in your field is going to come and lecture in your office, in your university, in your school. Oh my gosh, this is so exciting. This is so amazing. This world famous, whatever, master of whatever. And he comes and he talks, and to you it's like Chinese gibberish. Makes no sense. You actually know this field very well. This is actually your field. Yeah, but he's so brilliant. He's such a beyond brain in this area. He's flying way past your head. You don't understand a word he's saying. It's alma discasia. It's concealment. It's too high for you. All these levels higher than Malchus are too high for creation. It's alma discasia. It's concealment. They can't read a thing still. It's gibberish. They hear it, as versus level 1 where they didn't even hear it. But you're hearing gibberish. You're hearing stuff that doesn't make any sense to you. The lowest level, now we can start hearing words. Now it's actually words in a language I understand. Now it's Alma Disgalia. Now it's revelation. Now creation can benefit. That's why Malchus is God's power of speech. Because God speaks and it is. Creation is through God's speech. No, someone just asked me a question, so I did not say it clearly. Malchus is Alma de Isgalia. Everything higher than Malchus is Alma de Iskasia. We're looking here in the prototype of in the world of Atzilus. We're going to discuss in Tanya how this then plays out in all the 4 worlds. But we're starting at the top, as we spoke last week of the first palace, the world of Atzilus. So every level higher than Malchus is de Iskasia. That's an Aramaic word, which means concealment. Malchus is de Iskalia. It's small enough that we can hear it. It's not gibberish anymore. It's not a foreign language anymore. We can read it. We can hear it. We can benefit from it. That's why here in Malchus is God's speech, because God speaks and things are. God's speech is his power of creation. Malchus is the mother, because the mother is the faculty of creation, of nurturing, of giving life. Malchus is, yes, she's number 10. Why is she important? She's very important because she's number 10. Because she's small enough, creation can benefit. And we can have the mother, and we can have the speech, and we can have creation. And it could be de Iskalia. It could be revealed so we could benefit from it. That was the first of the Kabbalistic names. The second one was Metrinusa. Metrinusa, again, is Aramaic, and it means the queen. So there's the Malka in Aramaic. That's how you say the king. We would say the Melech. And the Metrinusa, the queen. So Malchus is called the queen because, again, in this dynamics, male, female, giver, nurturer, king, queen, Malchus represents the feminine energies. She's the queen. She receives from the king. In this specific prototype we're talking about here, the king element would be God's will, God's wisdom, Torah, high, beyond, intense powers that are then invested within the queen. The male is now coming and investing within the female, the giver within the nurturer, that Malchus can be the, as we say, kli kibul, the vehicle to receive all these higher powers, and from then can come forth life of all of creation. So God's higher powers, the king, specifically here his will and wisdom, Chabad, Malchus, the queen, the recipient, the vehicle, the vessel for these powers, to take them and chew them up, digest them, produce something from them, the vivification of creation. The third term, Ema Tata, the lower mother. Now, why is she called the lower mother? Because Kabbalistically, in the spiritual world, here we're talking about the spiritual world of Atzilus. This is true in all the spiritual worlds, but we're just focusing on Atzilus now, the highest of the 4 spiritual worlds, as we say, within our solar system, within the worlds of tikkun, of rectification. And as I said, later in Tanya, we'll read how this plays out in the next 3 worlds. So we're just focusing now on Atzilus, the highest world. There is the upper queen, the upper mother, and the lower mother. The upper mother is the faculty of bina, comprehension, understanding. The lower mother is sovereignty, is malchus. So again, by this term, I'm expressing who she is. She's a mother. She's a nurturer. She's a creator. But she's the lower mother because Bina is also a mother. Up there, highest dimension, God's first revelation of self, will, seminal wisdom, understanding, connectivity, keser, chachma, bina, das. The Bina, the understanding, the comprehension, that's a mother. But that's the upper mother because that's very intense energies way beyond what creation can handle. Well, we need there to be a mother there. We need the nurturing there. We have up there the father and the mother. Chachma, seminal wisdom, is the father. And Bina, understanding, comprehension, is a mother. This is a dynamic duo from which the energy of creation can emerge. But it's too intense there for creation to get it. So now it goes into the lower mother, Malchus. And from within Malchus, filters. Now it can come forth to creation. And the final term we said is actually the term most commonly used in the Talmud, in Gemara. Meaning in the Talmud, it doesn't say Metronusin, it doesn't say Amad Eskalian, it doesn't say Ematata. The Talmud says Shechina. But it's not an insignificant term because in the Talmud it's a very significant term. So what's Shechina? Shechina, as the Rebbe is going to tell us, is from the word shochen, to dwell. A shachen is a neighbor. Like the verse, V'shachanti b'socham. Right? Coming up. Mincha of this Shabbos, Truma, Vasuli Mikdash v'shachanti b'socham, and I will dwell in them. So God there is saying, make for me a tabernacle, and I will dwell in them. What does he mean, I will dwell? God, we're just using the term God very generally here, is way beyond creation. I will dwell means from this way beyond energy, he's going to come down to be within the lower dimension to vivify it. That's what Shechina means. For those of you that have studied Basi Lagani, first original Basi Lagani of the Rebbe, of Tafshin Yud Aleph, the Rebbe speaks at length of this concept. The very opening section of that Basi Lagani, the Rebbe develops at length this idea of Shechina, and shows us how Shechina is a very relative term. What do I mean by relative term? Shechina means, if I will decontextualize, it means a higher level energy of God that descends to be the core, highest level in a lower reality. I'll say that again. I want to make sure it's clear. A higher energy of God, higher, beyond, that comes down to be the vivification of a lower reality. So Shechina implies a descent, and from that point of descent to be the primary source of God energy for that lower dimension. So God is way beyond Shechina, right? We'll call Ein Sof. Ein Sof, God's infinity. But from Ein Sof, from infinity, you can't vivify creation. You're like way beyond. Or like we say in our davening, there's Hakadosh Baruch Hu and Shechina, Kutchabrichu and Shchinte. Hakadosh Baruch Hu, God beyond. That's what Kadosh means, separate, beyond, hovering above. But hovering above doesn't help us, so to speak. I mean, that's a wrong way to put it. Obviously, everything helps us. But hovering above is very remote from us. So God, Hakadosh Baruch Hu, has to descend into Shechina. Hakadosh Baruch Hu is a masculine dimension. Shechina is a feminine dimension. In the Aramaic, as we say in our davening, Kutchabrichu and Shchinte. As we're saying in the language of the Tanya, Ein Sof and Shechina. So the term Shechina, if we're calling Malchus Shechina, what we are saying is, within this faculty, the lowest of the 10 dimensions of the 10 spheres, the highest energies, the Ein Sof, infinite energies of God, have come down to be shochen, an indwelling from a much higher dimension to a much lower dimension, that here they can vivify this new revelation of God. So that's what Shechina means. That's what Malchus does. Malchus is God Shechina. Malchus is God from a much higher space that has come down to this much lower space to give life. Because from the higher space, she's too remote to give life. So she has to come all the way down. So Malchus is a higher dimension that came down to give life to this lower dimension. That's what Malchus does. That's her power of creation. That's God's speech. And that is what we're saying are the dynamics here. That God's first expression of self is will and chachma and bina and das, these levels of intellect. And it's amazing and God's revealed and it's in Torah, but it's too high for creation to touch. So that energy comes down, 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 down to the lowest level, to Malchus. Okay, here it's Alman Ziskalia. Here there's a lot of constriction, relatively speaking. Here there can be creation. Here creation can handle it. So it's Shechina. It's this much, much higher energy that has come down to be safe. You're not going to get burnt. You're just going to get warmed by the glow. Now the lights can filter through and become very, very, very small to vivify every single level and element and every individual creation. So the interplay of the will and wisdom, as they're within Torah, highest dimensions, and Malchus, the lowest dimension, all this energy filtered through Malchus, then the thin strands can come out, the very, very minimized energy that all of creation can exist. Any questions on this? Any thoughts on this?
I have a question. So in Bati Legani, the Rebbe speak about the Shechina going up 7 levels, right? And then Avraham and, all the tzaddikim brought it down. So there was a time that there was no Shechina upon the universe, upon...
You're saying during the time of those 7 sins before
Yeah.
started bringing it down, that level of God called Shechina, yes. That doesn't mean there was no God in this world.
Yeah, but
that
Shechina...
level of Shechina, yes, 100%, absolutely. So really, I mean, not in Tafshin Yud Aleph, not in that first mimer in 1951, but probably like in 1971, because it's a 20-year cycle. So I believe the next round, which was in 1971, I think that's the mimer where the Rebbe says, well, what are we talking about here? If the Shekhinah was on planet Earth, that means Mashiach. Once you have Mashiach, there's no going back. So how can we say the Shekhinah was originally here and then got kicked out? That doesn't even make sense. So the Rebbe explains that when we say Shekhinah, we don't literally mean the Shekhinah. We mean the Hakshara for the Shekhinah. Like the ability for there to be Shekhinah.
Yeah.
So it never was actually literally Shekhinah, because it was literally Shekhinah on planet Earth, that's Mashiach. But it was the precondition for the Shekhinah, and that's what left and was schlepped back down from Avraham all the way through Moshe. And then from the Alter Rebbe all the way down again through us. Okay, we will stop here. We are obviously in the middle, so if it's not 100% clear, that makes perfect sense because we're in the middle. But we will continue next week, and Emir Hashem, by then I hope it will be completely clear and you will know all the secrets of creation.